Today, it's an honor to have with us Dr. Bruce Mutter. Dr. Bruce Mutter, as most of you I'm sure know, is the medical director of Morningside. He's a graduate of the School of Medicine in Toronto. He has a fellowship in family practice. He's also certified in geriatrics, and he's a physician with the Heritage Medical Group also. So he's a busy man, and he's going to be talking to us today about the issue of immunizations. So please welcome Dr. Bruce Mutter. Bruce?
Human life expectancy has increased an astonishing 20 years in the past century. Now, 1/3 of that increase is due to advances in medicine, that is, improvements in the treatment of heart disease, cancer, infectious diseases, and so forth. But 2/3 of that increase is in public health measures. Clean water, sanitation, eradication of tuberculosis, and particularly in the use of vaccines. By any measure, vaccine development is one of the landmark accomplishments of our time. Smallpox, the scourge of mankind since biblical times, is gone. Polio is next. We're very close. In the 1980s, we were getting 50 to 55,000 cases of polio a year in the worldwide. We're now down to 100. So eradication, we're confident we'll see eradication of polio. Measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, whooping cough, although not eradicated, are all largely a thing of the past in developed countries. I've got a little graph here which shows this increase in life expectancy. From 1900 to 2000, this century, the blue are white people, the red is black people, and you can see it's a nice upward curve, a good 20 years. Now, there are some bumps on the curve if you look. Right here, the 1930s, up to 45 is, we think like the Depression, and also World War II. But look at this. What's that? You got it. This was the Spanish flu. 1918. Yeah, 1918. In our family, we lost two members. Two of my mother's brothers. One was 2, the other 20. I don't know if any of you, your families, had similar experiences. And it is the centennial of that terrible event, actually to the month. It was in the fall of 1918 that the second wave, the deadly wave of the influenza pandemic, tore across the world, and it raged for about 8 months to a year. At the end of that time, well north of 50 million people were dead. Okay? About 5% of the world population died that year. It dropped life expectancies around these are American data, but around the world. So, today, we're going to talk about vaccines, this remarkable achievement, and yet in recent times there's been some skepticism that has developed over both the effectiveness of vaccines and also their side effects, okay, and safety. And that has led to actually decreased vaccination rates in many communities, which is very distressing. And this is what happens when those vaccination rates drop. So I brought you some measles data. This is measles data for the whole nation, for the states, back to 2010. And you can see 2014 was a bad year. This was the year of the Disneyland outbreak, remember Disneyland? 145 cases in unvaccinated people. And there was also an outbreak in an Amish community. I don't remember what state. And they got 380, they were all unvaccinated, they got 380 cases. Okay, so 2014 was a wake-up year. Since then, most states have really tightened vaccination rates, vaccination regulations in schools, okay? And you can see we're getting back on track here in measles control. So, today we're going to talk about the adult vaccination schedule. We'll start at age 50. Now, everyone should get, every adult, and children as well, should get an influenza vaccine every year. The effectiveness of the influenza vaccine is about 60 to 65% in young people and middle-aged people. Unfortunately, it drops to about 20% at age 80 and 85. Okay? Get an influenza shot yearly, and last year's influenza vaccine was unfortunately only about 30% effective, for reasons which we'll get into in the influenza part of my lecture. Basically, the influenza virus is very good at shifting antigens, okay, and that's what it did last year. We have to start manufacturing influenza vaccine in April, and so in April they take a look at the strains that are in the world and tailor the vaccine to that. But unfortunately, between April and the fall, the vaccine changed. And we'll study in a few minutes why influenza is so good at that. So we got only 30% last year. And then at age 50, get the new shingles shot. Now, that's Shingrix. Now, I guess everybody's heard of Zostavax, the shingles vaccine? Okay. The old one, yeah. Shingrix is going to replace Zostavax very, very quickly. And the differences are, Zostavax is given at age 60. It's one shot. It is roughly 60% effective at preventing shingles in 60-year-olds, but the effectiveness drops to about 20% at 85. Okay, so it drops off. Also, the immunity begins to wane after 5 or 6 years. It's still effective, but the immunity is beginning to drop off. Shingrix is 2 shots, one now and the other at a booster at between 2 and 6 months. It does have more local side effects. It's more powerful, so we get more sore arms. The effectiveness, though, is 90% at all age groups, 90% at 50, 90% at 85, and the immunity lasts at least 8 or 10 years without any tapering off. So it's a dramatically better shot. At age 50, get your shingles shot, and then at age 65, you want to do your pneumonia shot, and that's 2. Start with a Prevnar 13, and then there's a booster shot of Pneumovax 23 at least a year later. Okay? Now what do the numbers refer to? Well, the bacteria pneumococcus has about 80 to 85 subtypes, different versions of pneumococcus. And Prevnar 13 is a very powerful immunization against the 13 most common serotypes. Pneumovax 23 is a less powerful vaccine, but against 23 of these serotypes. So it's less powerful but broader. Together, these give a pretty good protection against pneumococcal pneumonia, which is the most common pneumonia in older people. Okay, so pneumonia vaccine. And then 2 shots and you're done. You don't need any more in life, that's it. Get a Tdap. certainly by age 65. Now, Tdap refers to tetanus, diphtheria, and the P is pertussis, which is whooping cough. Tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough. The reason for this is that whooping cough is coming back. We're actually seeing a fair bit of it now. So we were all immunized for whooping cough when we were younger, but the immunity is waning over the years. And so the CDC is calling for one booster shot of Tdap, and it can be any time. Conventionally, we do it at age 65, but it can be younger. Okay? And after that, they remind you to get your tetanus, diphtheria every 10 years like we should be doing, but many of us don't. Okay?
You never think about it.
You don't think about it, yeah, yeah. But the reason for getting this is very important. The reason for getting this is to get the whooping cough part. And then you want to continue your influenza shots, but you can consider the high potency shot. So we've developed a high potency influenza shot. The difference with the regular is that the high potency is 4 times as powerful. It puts 4 times the amount of antigen in the shot as in the regular one. It is moderately more effective at preventing pneumonia, preventing influenza, but it has certainly an increase in side effects, mainly sore arms, and some people are a little sicker afterwards. The reason for this is to combat that low 20% response rate in 85-year-olds. So you can consider this. At this point, both the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, and the American Geriatric Society is recommending either equally. They're not taking a position. And you can decide, do I want a little better influenza protection at the expense of a little increase in side effects? It's a personal decision. We also make an egg-free, no, influenza vaccines are made in eggs. We now have an egg-free vaccine as well. It's a recombinant DNA vaccine. That's probably the way vaccines will be made in the future, but at this point it's quite expensive. But it is completely egg-free. Okay? I'm going to show you the CDC table, and I apologize for this. This is why I have a cheat sheet. But we'll go over it. And this is, now I got to tell you, this is page 1 of 9, okay? Of these tables and footnotes and every special issue you could think. What do you do if you're traveling to Asia? What do you do if you have AIDS? What do you do if you're a COPD smoker, and so on and so on? Or you're taking certain chemotherapy drugs, on and on and on, okay? It's all very complete in the CDC document. We're just going to do the first page. Influenza shot annually. Again, consider the high potency at over 65. This is your Tdap. This is your tetanus, diphtheria, and whooping cough in our cheat sheet. This is your measles vaccine, okay? The vast majority of you will not need this. If you are born before 1957, you're presumed to be immune. We've all had it. We don't need the shot. If you're a healthcare worker, if you're in various high-risk circumstances, you will need to have blood serology to make sure you've had it, and you get a shot if you don't. But you will not need to worry about MMR. Okay?
That is not inherent.
I know. I'm giving you the CD. This is the more simplified. Chickenpox, born before 1980, you're presumed immune. You don't need a chickenpox vaccine. This is RZV5, and the footnotes is Shingrix. Okay? Get a Shingrix shot at age 50, 2 doses. Or Zostavax. They still recognize Zostavax, but this is going to disappear very quickly, and everybody's going to do this. HPV is given only till age 26. These are your pneumonia vaccines. This is your Prevnar 13. This is your Pneumovax 23. Again, 1 dose at age 65 and a booster at least a year later. Hepatitis shots. For you, You don't need them. You need them if you're traveling to Asia. And there is a hepatitis, now a combined hepatitis A and B. It's 3 shots given over 6 months. 0, I think 2 months and 6 months, okay, to immunize you against both. You don't need this unless you're traveling to Asia or you're in high-risk situations. Meningococcus, you don't need the kids get this and Hib. So, again, another 9 pages of all this. Just remember basically the cheat shot. Again, quickly, influenza shots yearly, shingles shot at age 50, pneumonia vaccine start at age 65, 2 shots, one and then one at least 1 year later in the Tdap, and maybe high potency influenza shots. That will cover 90% plus of your vaccination situations. If you're into one of the other special things, you need to consult your physicians. He will be into that 9 pages of footnotes and tables and everything else, and they will guide you. So that is the immunization schedule for adults. I'm going to take some questions on that, and then we'll dive into influenza. Go ahead.
Does having shingles give you any resistance?
Yes, it does, very much so. There is a risk of recurrence.
I've had it recur.
Yes. Now, in general, if you have a case of shingles, you'll not see it recur for at least 2 years. And then it's, I don't remember, the recurrence rate is maybe 5 or 10%, somewhere in that area. If you get a second shot, second episode, usually the second episode is milder than the first, but not always. And the shingle shot is, I should repeat the question. If you've had shingles, should you get the shingles shot? And the answer is they advise it, but the reality is that your risk of getting shingles is, again, is fairly small, and it will tend to be milder. If you get the shot, it's going to be 90% protective against that small recurrence rate. Yeah, the back.
There seems to be, I've experienced a shortage of the new shingles.
Yes, there is. There's a waiting list. So there's a shortage. I experienced a shortage in the shingles vaccine, the new one, and there's a waiting list. Yeah.
Even if one gets the high potency one,
Yes.
one would get the yearly booster, is that correct?
Yes, if you get the high potency shot, that is your yearly booster.
Yes.
Influenza and shingles.
Are we talking about influenza?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just one high potency shot. You don't get a second one, another one. You don't get the regular one.
But you would yearly.
Yearly have to get it, yes. It only gives protection for a year, which for reasons we'll get into. Yes. Go ahead.
Shots are offered at pharmacies, et cetera. How do we get the information to our primary care physician?
It depends. Generally, the pharmacy, so if you get a shot at the pharmacy, how does the information get to the primary care, to the physician's office to be recorded in your chart? And generally, they will send a note, or often they will send a note, but it's not 100%. Yes. Unfortunately, we don't have a overall medical database. Go ahead.
I've had Dion Gray, and I've always been told,
Dion
and
Gray.
I've read that I cannot get vaccinations.
That's true. You have to be careful. Well, for influenza vaccines, I'd have to look for the others. But
They just play it safe and say no vaccine.
yeah, but the particular concern is with influenza vaccines. So yes, that is an issue. Now, the difficulty is that influenza also can give Guillain-Barré. So not commonly, but occasionally. So that's a very good point.
So do I understand that you don't recommend shingle shots for those who are in their 80s?
No. Do we not recommend shingle shots for those in their 80s? No. We, with the new Shingrix, we recommend Shingrix. because it is still 90% effective, as opposed to the old Zostavax, which was only about 20% effective. Yes.
You may recall, early this year, there was an article in the Register, the Orange County Register, about a major study that said that the flu vaccine in the last 5 years was statistically ineffective for seniors.
Yes, that's the 20% effectiveness rate that we've talked about, yes.
Repeat the question.
I'm sorry, yeah, thank you. There was a comment that, an article in the Register that the flu vaccine for seniors was statistically ineffective. I would say that overstates it. It's, we feel it's 20% effective, but that's pretty low. Yes?
One got a pneumonia shot 2 or 3 years ago, and you wanted to get the other one. Would you go for the 23 or the 13 and then the 23?
Okay, yeah. If you got the pneumonia 2 or 3 years, pneumonia shot 2 or 3 years ago,
Yes.
and then what do you get next? Okay. So it depends what shot you got. And you may not know, okay, but ideally it would be a Prevnar 13 after the age of 65, in which case you would just get one more shot, which would be a pneumo 23. If you got a pneumovax, some people were higher risk, lung disease and smokers and so on, would have gotten a pneumovax earlier than age 65, and those people would get a Prevnar 13 at age 65 and another pneumovax at least a year later. If you got a pneumovax 23 first after the age of 65, you just get a booster of Prevnar 13. Okay? It just depends on the situation. And again, your physician can interpret these fine points. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
Yeah, you know that all the women, all the people in here are over 65.
Yes.
Pretty much, there may be a few. I had the pneumonia shot about 3 years ago, and then about a year later, I did get pneumonia.
Yes.
Not severe, not bad, but I did get it. And the same thing with shingles. I got a shingles shot, and then next thing I had a mild case of shingles.
Yes. Yes, so again, you probably had the Zostavax.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're a little older, so would be less than 60% effective. The Zostavax, even though it was only 60% effective and maybe 40% risk of getting it, if you got it, it tended to be milder.
Yes.
Okay, so there was still some advantage.
They told me it was mild.
Milder, yeah. And the pneumonia shot is not 100%. Remember, it's only pneumococcal pneumonia. Other types of pneumonia can occur. So it just cuts your chances down. Okay. We ready to go on to influenza? One more, yes.
I'm 74 and I haven't had any of these shots yet, so where do you start?
Start with a Prevnar 23, Prevnar 13, at least a year later, a pneumovax 23, and a Tdap, and they can be given at the same time, and then yearly shingle shots. Okay?
No.
Yearly influenza shots. Yeah, and then you can get caught up on your shingles vaccines. But you would, at this time of year, you'd do the pneumonia shot first, and ideally a flu shot and Tdap. Okay. Yes.
How far apart should those shingle shots be?
How far apart should shingle shots be? At least 2 months. 2 months, and it's often 6 months. So, at least 2 months. Let's do influenza. In light of the centennial, and also this is starting to get into influenza season. And I'm going to present just a capsule summary of influenza, the things that everybody should know, and then we're going to get into a little bit of the biology of influenza and also hit the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. Okay? So let's go. Influenza Essentials. So this is a winter bug. A winter bug. Does anybody know where influenza goes in the summer?
Close together.
Yeah, so yeah, right. Southern South America, in our area, in Europe. Okay, how does it get there? People? Well, just a minute. It's been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years, well before we got here. How does it travel? What did I hear? Birds. Birds, yes. Ducks, actually. Ducks, waterfowl. So humans are just collateral damage as far as influenza is concerned. Its main interest is in birds, and particularly in waterfowl. And what do waterfowl do? But they migrate. So this has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. The birds migrate from the south to the north to the south, and the influenza spreads. Okay? Winter bug. We get pandemics every 20 years or so, and we're a little overdue for a bad influenza outbreak. So it's a good thing, good thing that we can talk about it tonight. Influenza is a little bit like earthquakes. You know, the big ones are few and far between, and then there's a bunch of little ones in between, which tend to give you a false sense of security, and you kind of forget what the big ones were like. So influenza is like that. We need to be on our guard. It's spread by coughing and touching, and it lives on inanimate surfaces for several hours. Okay? It's infectious for 24 hours before symptoms begin, so you're spreading it before you even know you're sick. There's no way of preventing this. This is going to spread. We're going to have it. The incubation period is about 2 days, between 1 and 4. The mortality rate is higher in older people, but not always. In 1918, the Spanish flu, it hit primarily young, healthy adults. All right, so there are exceptions. The symptoms. The symptoms of classical influenza are pretty specific. It is the sudden onset of sore throat, fever, headache, muscle aches, especially back pain. People with influenza tell you, I hurt all over, but especially my back. And the absence of cough for the first 1 or 2 days. The cough starts usually at about day 2 or 3. So if you have those constellation of symptoms in influenza season, you've got influenza. On the back of your handout, there's a little cheat sheet on the influenza part about the differences between a cold and influenza, which I think kind of help you could look at it. It goes through them. The main complication is pneumonia, and that's generally how influenza kills people. That's how people died in 1918, overwhelming pneumonias in young people. But in older people, the symptoms can be very atypical, very unusual. You may just look sick, okay? You may not have any of the other symptoms. It can be very atypical. That's why we have to have a high index of suspicion. The diagnosis is, the lab test is by nasal swab. So they're taken, and there's 2 types of tests that are done on the nasal swab. One is the quick rapid test, which can be done in the office. You get the results in 5 or 10 minutes. The problem with that is it has a high false negative rate. Its negative rate is about 30%. So you can have influenza and the test can still be negative. On the other hand, it has a very low false positive rate. So if your test is positive, you've got the disease. But a negative test doesn't help you very much. So in reality, we don't use the test very much. If you have symptoms, you get treated, which we'll get into in a minute. There's a much more accurate test called the PCR test. And this is very accurate, but it's sent out to the lab and it takes a day to get back. We use this at Park Vista, particularly in that we're tracking influenza very, very carefully in the community. We look at it every day during influenza season, and we use the PCR test a lot to know exactly what's going on. And we do that in collaboration with the health department, okay? But that's more for tracking rather than diagnosis. From the point of view of treatment, if you have the symptoms, generally you get treated for influenza. I will tell you, sometimes with the rapid test, if we have a family with a lot of symptoms, we'll sometimes do it on 2 or 3 people. And if you can get 3 tests, even the false negative rate is 30%, if you can do 3 of them, and if any one of them's positive, you got it, is everybody gets treated. You know, that's a little trick we use, but for the most part, people are treated just on the basis of symptoms. And the PCR, we can send it out, but if you're going to treat influenza, you have to treat early. You don't want to wait 24 hours, so it's not much help in clinical situations. The treatment is an antiviral drug, Tamiflu. Again, this is not an antibiotic. It has none of the side effects of antibiotic. It does not cause diarrhea, rashes, or anything else like this. Remarkably few side effects. It's taken twice a day, generally for 5 days. And for uncomplicated influenza, you do not need antibiotics. If you're young, healthy, and you have influenza, you need Tamiflu. It's very effective. It started within 48 to 72 hours, and that's it. Now, antibiotics are used if pneumonia develops or severe bronchitis develops. But the hallmark of treatment for influenza is Tamiflu. I'll talk about prevention, and it's hand washing and masks. Hand washing and masks. And the alcohol solutions, hand solutions, are very effective against influenza and a lot more convenient, okay? It does live on inanimate surfaces, and they can be sterilized with 10% bleach solution. Talking about countertops, bathrooms, and so on, okay? Again, 10% bleach solution is 1 part bleach to 9 parts water. Flu shots, again, 60%, 65% healthy in the young, but only 20% or so in the elderly. And the high potency is better than that. And this brings us to the subject of herd immunity. So herd as in cows. Here's the way herd immunity works. If I am susceptible to an infection that's going in the community because I cannot get it vaccinated or it does not work, but if everybody around me is vaccinated, then I am protected. Herd immunity, okay? To be effective, you need to have a vaccination rate of at least 85%, and 90% is better to get good herd immunity. And that's one of the primary reasons why young people should get vaccinated, to protect older people, okay? Especially if you're in families and so on. So I want to go into vaccine side effects. Nothing's for free, everything has a side effect. And these are the figures from large vaccine studies. So they're divided into 2 types, local and general. Local is the sore arm, you can see the numbers here. And general, this is what people are concerned about when they get a flu shot, is the flu symptoms. Muscle aches, so on. Okay, you can read the numbers here. So this is a legitimate concern, okay? Now, I'm going to admit to a little subterfuge. I am presenting the figures from large vaccine studies, but the way these are constructed is that there's 2 arms to the vaccine studies. In one arm, you get the vaccine, and in another arm, you get the placebo, which is a saltwater shot. And you don't know whether you're getting the shot, okay? And I have presented here the figures from the placebo group. Here are all the studies. Here are all the side effects. So placebo and vaccine. And you can see we certainly do get more sore arms in the vaccine group. But here we come down to the flu group, the general ones, or the flu symptoms, and we get more muscle aching, but there is no difference in flu symptoms in the treatment or the placebo group. The flu vaccine does not give flu. The reason these people are all getting so sick is we give the flu vaccines in October and November, and all the infections are beginning to ramp up. The sore throats, the pharyngitis, the viruses, that, you know, and they're all going to get sick anyway, okay? The flu vaccine does not give the flu. All right. Let's jump into a little bit of biology and touch the 1918 pandemic. This is an influenza virus. This beautiful thing is an influenza virus. And these coiled things in the core are the genetic structure, and it's RNA. Now, animal cells, you know, we all run on DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Viruses and bacteria run on RNA, ribonucleic acid. That's the RNA. It acts just the same way DNA does in animal cells. Then we have a viral membrane here, which surrounds the core. And poking out of the membrane are these guys. And these are membrane proteins, or antigens, and these are what your immune system sees when you get infected with an influenza virus. The immune system hones in on these, and this is how it recognizes the virus. Now there's two types. The red here is called hemagglutinin, or shortened to H, and the N is neuraminidase, which is called N. So H for hemagglutinin, N for neuraminidase, HN. And there are 16 hemagglutinins known, and they're all numbered, and 9 neuraminidase, 9 N's known. So influenza viruses get referred to as H1N1, H3N2, okay? That's where those numbers come from, identifying these guys. All right. Now, the reason influenza is so tricky is that it's continually shifting its antigens, and it's got a large number to choose from. You know, 15, you know, all those H's and all those N's and the combination. And this is a game of cat and mouse, which is going on between the immune system and influenza, and it's been going on for thousands and hundreds of thousands of years of all sorts of different animals. And it keeps shifting, okay? Cat and mouse. All right. So, very quickly, we're going to hit the viral types. There's influenza A and influenza B. Influenza A is the important one. This is the one that gets humans, farm animals, and birds, okay? And all the major influenza outbreaks are influenza A. And there's influenza B, which is much milder. It affects only humans. Our vaccines, trivalent no longer used really. They're all quadrivalent. And that means that they have 2 A strains and 2 B strains. So again, in April, they look at the world, the vaccine producers look at the world, look at the serotypes, and make an educated guess. The trouble is this thing can change. And they make an educated, they select 2 A's, 2 A's, and 2 B's. And that's your vaccine for the following fall. All right. Quick talk to viruses to watch. This kind of rogues gallery here. H1N1 was the primary virus of the Spanish flu, 1918. H3N2 is the most common circulating one now. and we get some H5N1s, but mainly we're getting H3N2 is what's going on right now, and that's what's mainly in the vaccines, they always have an H3N2. And here's the one to watch, H7N9. This is your one of your avian flus, and it's circulating in birds right now. So the sequence of the development of influenza infecting humans is this. The influenza circulates in the birds. Then it's got to make the jump to mammals. It usually makes the jump to farm animals first, usually pigs. And that gets it used to mammalian lung. And then it jumps to humans, and then it's got to make the jump to be able to go from human to human. Okay? That's the usual sequence. And all these have made those jumps. This one has not. It's in the birds. It has, and there's some H1N1 in the birds now too. It's a novel H1N1. These have made the jump from humans, from the birds to humans, but it's mainly been in poultry workers and in Asia. So people heavily exposed, but so far there's been no human to human transmission. Our virus hasn't mutated enough to do that yet. When and if it does, this is going to be a bad actor because none of us have seen this. We all have seen some H1N1s and H3N2s, and we all have partial immunity to this, but this is a novel virus, and this could be bad news. Okay, so we're keeping our eye on that. I want to come back to the 1918 pandemic, just some of the interesting research on it. So the question is, what happened? Why was this outbreak so much more deadly than all the other influenza outbreaks? Why did it happen, and is it going to happen again? To answer that question, they've actually resurrected the 1918 virus. Yeah, what they did was, first they found some Eskimos that had died in the 1918 pandemic and then fallen into the permafrost and been frozen ever since for a century. And they tried to extract the virus from them, and that sort of worked, but not very well. But then they found some pathology slides of lung tissue, I think in the VA, and they were able to extract enough virus to reconstruct the viral genome from that. And I read that they've also done exhumed some bodies and were able to get enough from them, people who've been conventionally buried. So we were able to get the viral genome, and it's sequenced, and you can get it. You can go on the computer, and they'll see the sequence, all these base pair, the whole thing. Then, what they did was take a conventional influenza virus and insert the genetic sequences for these membrane proteins into the genome of the virus using plasmids, conventional treatment that we do all the time. So they rigged up this conventional influenza virus to be a 1918 virus. And what they found that was a true monster. It killed, so the question is, was this as bad as it was reported to be in 1918? And it certainly was. It killed every mouse exposed to it within 3 days, and the mice died of overwhelming pneumonia, just like they did in 1918. The mortality rate was 100% in the mice. Viral loads in the lungs were thousands of times more than conventional influenza. This was a true monster. A lot of us were very upset with doing this research, as you can imagine. It's a little bit like bringing a Tyrannosaurus back to life and hope it doesn't escape. Well, fortunately it didn't, and they did demonstrate that, one, we can make a vaccine against it, Okay? That's huge. And it will probably be sensitive to Tamiflu. Still the question comes, will it come back? And why was it like this? So, infections, epidemics of diseases that are that lethal usually don't spread. They kill people too quickly. So when you study epidemics, the really lethal ones tend to die out, or as they spread, they become less lethal. And because you want people to be sick and walking around and spreading it, okay? If you kill too quickly, the thing dies. So they become less lethal. This thing did not become less lethal. It spread quickly and it remained lethal. And the question is why? Was there something special about 1918? Anybody got any? The war. And the war ending, yes, right. And what was it particular about the war? It was trench warfare. And it appeared that it started primarily in the troops who were living in trenches, you know, for months on end, incredibly overcrowded, incredibly unsanitary, and in military barracks in the same, not much better, okay? And so the question is, did this give influenza, you know, the perfect storm to get going and not have to ramp down its lethality in order to spread? Is that what got it going? And then, as you said, it was as the war was ending, and these troops were being demobilized and brought back to their countries. Was it a perfect storm? We don't know. We hope so. We hope that it was a one-off event and that it won't happen again. If it does happen again, the projections are, the mathematical models are somewhere between 300,000 American fatalities up to as much as possibly 1 million in 6 or 8 months. Okay, so it's definitely bad news. If it does come back again, be thankful we have a vaccine. Be thankful we have a vaccine.
Why is it under the 5% that it was in 1918?
I'm sorry?
Those numbers are still below the 5% number. Is that just because we're better at medicine?
No, I'm sorry, the numbers are still below 5%. You mean that?
Mortality.
No, 5% of the world population died.
Yes.
The mortality rate of influenza in 1918 was, I think, somewhere between 10 and 20%. Well, over 10%.
But I'm saying that the predictions, if there were another infection.
Oh, another infection. Oh, I see. Yes. Yeah, it would be better because we have vaccines and Tamiflu and clean water and some of those deaths. So the question is, why wouldn't it be worse than as bad as 1918? It's because we have better sanitation, better treatment of pneumonia. Remember, people died generally of pneumonia, and if you treated the pneumonia, some survived. They did not have antibiotics then. So we would do a lot better than 1918, but we'd still have a lot of people die. Okay. I'm going to just close with a reflection here, and we'll take some questions. So the next pandemic is out there brewing somewhere. When it hits, we in the developed world will weather the storm quite well. Those in the third world will not. The entire world needs an effective public health system protecting everyone. And this is not a matter just of compassion, but also of our own preservation. I'm going to quote an article from the Wall Street Journal that was given a couple of years ago. It was on the occasion of Jonas Salk's 100th birthday. And Jonas Salk was a developer of the polio vaccine, you know, the Salk vaccine. And this was an interview with Edward R. Murrow. Do you remember Edward R. Murrow? Edward R. Murrow was interviewing Jonas Salk and asked, who owns the patent on this vaccine? Well, the people, I would say, Salk replied. There is no patent. Can you patent the sun? End of quote. For Dr. Salk, the whole endeavor was a gift from science to humanity, nurtured by the goodness of the American people. We must find ways to keep that spirit alive, winning back for modern medicine and public health the full confidence of the world's most generous nation. Thank you very much.
I'm still puzzled by that model. When you describe H1N1, but I see a myriad of objects.
Yeah, okay. She's puzzled by where to get the H1N1. There's only a myriad of these, but there's only two colors.
Oh, okay.
So the purple are, the red purple are, or the red are hemagglutinin, H, and the blue is N, neuraminidase.
So H3N2 would have more colors?
No, H3 would just be a different version of this. So there's what do we, I believe 16 of these. I think it's 16 different versions. They all look the same here, but molecularly they'll be different. And 9 of these. So the immune system will see different things, but you wouldn't. Molecularly they'll be different, but to the gross they'll look the same. Yes?
Do any of your virus answers have anything to help West Nile virus?
West Nile virus, no. I wish we, does anything, any of this help West Nile virus? No, there's no vaccine. Mosquito eradication.
But then when you look at the other numbers,
Yes.
I want to ask you on this virus, it was cleanliness and so forth and so on. How is this affecting the homeless when you'll see them out on the streets?
Yes.
They look like they haven't cleaned in a long.
Right, so the question is, so much of the public health prevention is cleanliness, and including influenza. And how does this affect the homeless? And this is a real problem. And you know, this is a communal problem. Like I said, public health is a measure which affects all of us. You are at risk for diseases from the entire community. And if you have a lot of poor sanitation in your community, you are at risk. Okay? Public health is a communal affair. It's not like I have heart disease and I control my cholesterol and I can control that risk completely. Okay? This is a communal risk. A very good question. Yes?
What is your opinion on the relationship of vaccines to things like autism?
Yeah, so far, I'm sorry, what is our, thank you, what is my opinion on the relationship of immunizations to autism? The main concern is MMR, measles, mumps, rubella is where most of the concern was with autism. And big studies to date have not shown any relationship to the vaccine. Now, there is a real concern with autism. It does seem to be becoming more prevalent. There's two parts to that. One is it's being recognized and labeled more, so that's an identification issue, but it also does seem to be actually increasing. The reason for this is unknown, but it does not appear to be vaccines. Okay? Yes?
It doesn't seem to be contagious, does it?
What? Autism? No. It's something else. Yes?
Is there anything in the works to, if Tamiflu is so good, to make it over the counter, or?
No, not that I've heard. Not that I've heard. It would be nice, yeah, because it really.
You get sick.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
What's the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Is there any work on making Tamiflu over the counter? And no. That would be a good idea because it really has fairly low side effects. Yes. Back, yeah.
Currently, right now, at MIT,
Yeah.
they're doing some research on genetics and being able to dissect the DNA and fill it out with a drug called Fiskar, I think it is.
CRISPR?
CRISPR.
Yeah, CRISPR, yes, yes.
Yes. Can that have an effect on diseases in the future?
Yeah, so can genetic modification, especially CRISPR, have an effect on diseases? Yes, it definitely could. They use a similar sort of thing, I presume, to put the RNA, for example, back into this to do up the influenza. I think they use plasmids, which are little infective things which go in, but CRISPR kind of does the same thing. Yeah, very much so. It's a new world.
It will be.
It will be a new world, yeah, yes.
What's the reason that vaccines are less effective in seniors than in younger people?
Very good question. What's the reason why vaccines are less effective in older people? The stock answer is immunosenescence. That means that the immune system is less robust. But the specific reason is why and what can we do about it, and that's the topic of a lot of hot research. But immune senescence. Any other? Okay, yeah.
Okay, Bruce, thank you so much. Could I ask one question? Could you just briefly discuss the side effects of the actual disease of shingles?
The actual disease of shingles?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, let's do an overview of. So, shingles is, of course, the reactivation of chickenpox. Everybody understand that? Okay. So, you get chickenpox, which is a pox virus, as a child, and the virus actually remains like in jail in the immune system, locked into nerve tissue, held in jail by the immune system for all those years and decades. Later in life, as the immune system begins to wane with this immunosenescence that we were talking about, or sometimes if you are ill and under a great deal of stress and the immune system is stressed and fighting other things, and sometimes, just for reasons which we don't understand, the virus escapes the jail that's in the nerve tissue and begins to replicate, begins to reproduce. And it reproduces in just one dermatome, in other words, one section of nerve coming out of the spinal cord. Okay? So it follows along on a hoop like this with a rash which is full of vesicles, fluid-filled spots. Classically, there's pain for 2 or 3 days before the spots come out, and then you get the spots and the diagnosis can be made. The severity will vary from being very mild to extremely severe. I've had people terribly ill with shingles, and a few even die from complications. The painful rash lasts 7 to 10 days, and it can be very, very miserable. The rash then begins to crust, and the pain begins to fade. The whole process will last 4 to 6 weeks. And then the pain is mainly gone, but it's a miserable 6 weeks. In up to 20% of people, they will have something called post-herpetic neuralgia, which is pain which persists after the 6 weeks. In other words, the rash is healed, the rash is gone, the skin looks normal, but you still have pain in that area. It's a burning, what's called neuropathic pain, burning, very unpleasant, and often requires drugs to control. I should mention that the illness is infectious, While you have the vesicles, until it crusts, it can give chickenpox to susceptible people.
And
Very nasty. So that's the reason for getting Shingrix vaccine.
The reason I asked that question is because when I was in practice, and I'm sure Bruce has seen it many times also, I have seen patients with shingles, with peripheral neuritis lasting for as long as a year.
Yeah.
So the shingles vaccine is something that shouldn't be overlooked by us as seniors. It's real important.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Especially the new one. Especially the new one.
Bruce?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Bruce?
Yeah.
Mine, also, for these people to be aware with their families.
Yes.
My next door neighbor, 18 years old, got shingles in her eye.
Yes.
And it lasted, she took a year out of school almost in
Yeah.
order to get it treated both.
Shingles in the eye is terrible. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Mutter. Great presentation for you.